Hi, today we'll be speaking to Lanie Carstens on marketing. How are you, Lanie?
I'm great, thank you. How are you?
Yeah, I'm good, thanks. So to start us off, can you tell us a bit more about your role as a global head of content and production social at Dentsu International?
Sure. I've been in the position for about 2 years. I'm the global head of a in-house production service called Content Symphony, which is an AI-enabled tech platform that links 28 of our creative studios around the world. I started my career with a marketing qualification. I then went into advertising for a few years before moving to the media owner side of the business. I was in publishing for many years, did a 3-year stint in China, then moved back to South Africa, and then was offered this job at Content Symphony in January last year.
Amazing. So the most common question that we should be asking ourselves on the topic of marketing is, what advice would you give to young entrepreneurs or individuals who want to market themselves and their businesses effectively in today's society?
I think, use be authentic. I think that's the first thing I would say is, don't try and copy anybody else. I mean, certainly you can look to mentors and people that inspire you in the path that you've chosen, but absolutely be yourself. Pursue something that you really love with absolute passion. I really strongly believe in that, and be relentless in your pursuit of your passion. And then also because teenagers are automatically very socially aware, and on social media platforms use those to your advantage. I've seen so many success stories of people. In fact, I was reading about a comedian this morning who had a really small following and then blew up on TikTok, and now he's world famous and is sold out in all his shows. So whatever you decide to pursue, use the tools available to you to really market yourself. Don't leave it in the hands of anyone else.
Yeah, and you mentioned social media and these social platforms to become a huge advantage in this world in general and a disadvantage in some ways. Are there any recommendations of how to utilize these social media platforms more effectively?
I think be very clear on what you are, who you are, what you authentically represent. I think that's, for me, is a really good starting point on no matter what platform you're on. I think be honest, be transparent, be true to what you believe. Uh, Promote what you're promoting, okay, with absolute authenticity, but also try and collaborate. I think that's the one thing that I've seen a lot of success with podcasters. There's a wonderful woman in the UK that I stumbled upon called Fern Cotton, and she basically has a place called the Happy Place Official. That's her podcast, title. And what she does is she interviews people who talk about happiness and the pursuit of happiness, and what we can do about mental health issues, right through to children, right through to businesses. So I think find your point of view, stick to that point of view, and then collaborate with, which it looks like you're really doing, collaborate with inspiring people in the industry to help tell your story.
Yeah, and then a personal brand is also almost essential in achieving success, in my opinion. And please correct me if I'm wrong, but I think a personal brand is who you are and how you do things. How can young individuals effectively market themselves and their personal brand to try to create the perfect individual in themselves in the eye of other people?
So you actually touched on a word there that I think is quite interesting, because you mentioned perfect. And I think sometimes there is as much value in being imperfect, especially in social media and in social platforms. People sense immediately if your persona is too contrived, or if your messaging is too corporate or sponsored, if you know what I mean. I think you need to find your true authentic voice, and don't be afraid to be vulnerable. Don't be afraid to make mistakes. Actually, people trust and engage with people that they relate to. And I think if you can make yourself as relatable as possible, passionate about your product or passionate about what you're doing, but also be very, very real about yourselves. And I know I keep banging on about that, but I really do believe it. I think this pursuit of perfection, and that also plays a little bit into what you spoke about with social media having a negative impact sometimes on people, is, we work with we have an influencer division within Dentsu called Gleam Futures, and they have basically gone on record openly stating that they will not work with influencers who use social media filters, because that pursuit of a perfect look and a perfect face and a perfect beauty, I suppose, is causing a lot of mental unwellness in most people, and I'm saying teenagers and adults alike. So, I think be very clear about being real, and and follow some of the advice of these people, because I think you have a very important role to play. The more you get a deeper following, you really have an important role to play to build a positive influence with other youngsters.
Yeah, and I can only imagine in the marketing world, attention must be something that's almost a huge topic to discuss when trying to almost grab someone's attention and keep them invested in the product. How can young entrepreneurs capture attention of their target audience and make a lasting impression through their marketing efforts?
Great, lovely question. I've spent about 15 years in content marketing. So what content marketing is effectively branded storytelling. So tell a story that somebody wants to hear, that they don't mind being interrupted with. So if you think of a world where there myriad adverts kind of flying around on social platforms, on TV, on various medium channels, you're always interrupted and constantly interrupted with sponsorships and adverts. Be the information or be the content that people want to hear. Think of your story, think of what you want to try and tell. And I think that way you will grab people's attention. I've had in my media experience, people have said, well, a podcast can't be longer than a minute, or people only have a 7-second attention span. They do that because they're bombarded with information. But if you do something that can really stand out from that clutter, and you can hold someone's attention with a very compelling story, you will hold that attention for up to an hour if you can. So I really believe it's about the quality of the content and the quality of the messaging, and that will help you stand out.
So
don't be noise.
Yeah, so it just comes down to telling a story, and I mean, I was reading this article the other day about a hero's journey and how people are invested in the story of a hero. Is that what you're saying?
Absolutely. And a story can be 30 seconds, 90 seconds, and can be 3 minutes, it can be 15 minutes. But how you tell it, how you engage with people, the quality of the topic as well is really important. And I think that's right. People love to see other people's success stories. They love to see how people have, faced adversity and been successful. And one of the people, that I actually attended, I was lucky enough to attend a talk recently at an Adobe workshop in London, was by Stephen Bartlett. So Stephen Bartlett wrote, he has a podcast, How to Be a CEO, and he's written books, and he is a classic rags to riches multi-millionaire right now. And he came from a very, very poor family, and his advice, usually if you listen to his podcast, which I highly recommend, is no matter what life throws at you, no matter what obstacle you face, just keep going and be relentless in your pursuit of your dream.
Yeah, and when talking about the story, you mentioned how important it is to tell the correct story and in the correct manner. What is the correct manner to tell that story?
It depends on what the story is, I guess. If it's a human truth story, it could be an interview. It could be, interviewing people on a range of topics that are important to you. It really depends on what the story is, and that you match the right medium or the right channel with the right story. So, whether that's on a social media channel, whether it's on TikTok, whether it's on Instagram, wherever it is where you're going to be telling that story, make sure that the message and the channel are appropriate.
Yeah, absolutely. And we're discussing technology and AI is quite a big topic, because it is a big topic in the world at the moment. And how do you see the future of this content production and distribution evolving?
So I think from a production and distribution, it's going to get better and better and better. I actually think in terms of generative AI, and we actually are still in its infancy, although it's been going for a few years now. It seems to be the buzzword wherever you look in terms of marketing and publishing and content, certainly. So I think in terms of technology, AI is going to be smarter and sharper than ever before. And I think it's just going to get more and more effective. I mean, I've seen a couple of videos recently where you can barely tell that it's AI generated. So I think that is definitely the route and the path. However, I think as marketers, I think we need to make sure that we understand that these are tools to enable a craft. It's not the craft. You still need human insights. You still need human IQ in order to mold the stories, and use AI technology as an enabler. don't let it take over, because you still will need, in my belief anyway, that absolute human connection and intervention.
Yeah, and is there any advice you would give to individuals to try captivate and almost take advantage of this technology before it gets bigger?
Do your research. I think, to just, again, there's so many different platforms that are coming up. You've got Mid-Journey, you've got you've got all kinds of different AI tools. I think utilize them, play with them, but don't let them take over. I think that's the danger, is that, in fact, there was a social media influencer. I attended a Cannes recently, in America. Sorry, not in America, in Asia, where she has over 1 million followers, and she is virtual. However, what she has done, and she's obviously, there are a team of humans behind the scenes, basically creating her persona. But what she does is she's very honest about being virtual. She absolutely is honest about the fact that she is not a real human being. She is a virtual kind of avatar, and but there are a team of creators kind of behind her. So I think, again, use it to your advantage, but don't let it take over.
Yeah, absolutely. And when comparing the likes of humans working on advertisement and technology, how would you compare the advantages and disadvantages of that?
Again, as I've mentioned now, use AI as an enabler. It's an incredible tool to get things done really, really fast. I mean, in some of our production, we now use cloud-based production technology, where we can have 3 editors in 3 different locations around the world simultaneously working on a piece of advertising and photography, and that can all happen in the cloud. So that's a wonderful enabler again. So and then going back to humans, don't forget that, for all data-led marketing initiatives, there's a human insight behind it. For content that is crafted, you sometimes still need that thought leadership and that almost journalistic approach to develop the content, and then you can use Gen I to kind of spin off into shorter bits of content. So use it as an enabler again.
Yeah, and are there any challenges or disadvantages that you see AI bringing in the future?
There's a lot of debate about that in terms of how it's going to impact, and what type of jobs it's going to impact. And I think that's very real. And again, I think just keep educated, keep researching, keep on top of trends that are emerging in that space, because it is changing so rapidly. And I think, I mean, metaverse a year ago was the big trend, and that seems to be dying down a little bit already. So I think ride the wave, be aware of what it is, educate yourself as much as possible. Yeah, and just use it to your advantage.
Yeah, and as we discussed earlier about the attention span and trying to grab people's attention, I can only imagine in this world that things that are authentic and different and in your face almost grab your attention. How can young individuals find and showcase their authentic voices in their marketing strategies, in trying to be different from their competitors, but still appealing to a wide range of people?
Yeah, again, I think it's just, again, depending on your message, be yourself, understand your point of view. So my advice usually with people starting out with marketing is understand your positioning or your brand's positioning, whatever it is that you're trying to market, and really understand and try and be able to articulate that in an elevator pitch. It's a really good test, actually. If you're able to articulate your business in 90 seconds, so in other words, to bring the whole story into a succinct 90 seconds, then you know that it's kind of properly landed within you as an individual and as a marketer. Then you can expand on different angles and different storytelling opportunities.
Yep. So we're obviously dealing with an individual who has their own business and going to market for themselves. But as a leader in the marketing industry, what are some key skills or qualities you believe are necessary for success in this field?
You mean in a career?
Yes, yes. Like if you're marketing another business, what are some key skills or qualities you need?
Within another organization?
Yes, exactly. Yep.
Yeah. So the key things, and I've done this for quite a while, is you need to have attributes such as tenacity. You have to be resilient. You have to have a positive attitude and an openness to keep learning throughout your career. So no matter where you are, no matter what life stage or stage you get at, if you become a CEO or you become a president or a VP or an MD, you always be open to learning, because as we discussed a moment ago, technology is changing at a rapid pace. AI is changing at a rapid pace. So keep abreast of all of those trends, and just be resilient. And the other thing I want to point out is don't take things personally. If you're working in an organization or a big corporate, they may make changes or structural changes to the organization that may or may not include you. Don't try not to take those things personally. So you know what I mean? Believe in your own brand, believe in the company you work for, but be resilient. Be open to change. I've seen unprecedented change take place in the last 5 years, where companies have almost rebranded themselves, changed direction, changed strategy, and almost happens now on an annual basis, whereas many years ago, it used to happen every 5 or 7 years. It's now happening every year. So being comfortable in the uncertainty is probably one of the biggest skills, I believe.
Yeah. And you've overseen a large team and worked with major clients around the world. Can you tell us how any strategies that you've used to try link a large company with the target audience that they're trying to link with?
Yeah, many. So I think, again, that goes down to content marketing, actually, which is, branded journalism for clients. So we've worked, most of my career has been spent working with big global or regional blue chip organizations. I think it's understanding the voice of that brand. So, if we marketing that brand to an audience, understand what that brand stands for, the strategy behind the brand, and then apply almost an editorial or a content lens to that, to tell the story to individuals or to customers to get them to engage with that brand. And there's some incredible success stories, around that being done very effectively. So many years ago, we would probably do that in a combination of magazines, podcasts, videos, social media. And now things are moving obviously very, very digital. So, and in the digital space, it's even more cluttered. So you need to make sure that your brand narrative really stands out from that clutter, as I've mentioned.
Yeah. And when dealing with certain things like color, or are there any specific colors or different things you can use to try grab an audience?
I think that's quite old. I mean, if I may say this, it's my personal opinion, but I think that's a little bit of a dated approach. I think you need to be very careful, especially if you're working with global or regional brands, that colors and textures and symbols will mean very different things in different markets. So you'll find, I've worked with a lot of global brands where they've had regional marketing experts in each area to make sure that the content lands properly for that particular audience. So what will work in America certainly won't work in China, for example. So I'm making very distinct comparisons. Yes. So again, I think it's about understanding the brand, the brand's positioning, and very much understanding the cultural nuances of the audience that you're trying to attract, because you can get it very wrong.
Yeah, and how would you compare the different textures and colors that maybe using compared to America and Japan or China?
Again, research. You'd look at if you were advertising or marketing a brand in a certain category, look at what the competitors are doing. Look at what your other agency competitors, but also your particular brand competitors are doing, and use people on the ground that are culturally nuanced, that understand the market, and test. The great thing about social media is that people forget quite quickly as well. Things are online and then they're gone. So if you make a mistake, or if you do something that is offensive culturally, I've seen some examples in South Africa of big corporate brands getting things wrong, from a cultural or race perspective, perhaps. And the key thing is to correct straight away. So if you've made a mistake, inadvertently or in error, try and course correct as quickly as possible.
And how do you know if you've made that mistake?
You'll know. Your customers will tell you. Your customers will tell you.
Okay, cool. And I'm going to go back to the content and AI side of it, which is, as I've mentioned before, obviously a huge topic at the moment. What role do you believe content and media can play in bringing about positive change in our society, particularly for young people?
I think the role is an incredibly important one. And I think, if I think about some of the brands out there that are talking about that are bringing to bear a sustainable message. And certainly all the research that I'm seeing is that, you know, Gen Zs, for example, are more concerned, they're more likely to buy into a brand that has a sustainable message around it. So I think, you know, brands have brands have a very important role to play in society at the moment in telling a positive story about mental well-being, around social issues, around cultural issues, around celebrating diversity. I mean, that's another big topic, which I believe, you know, brands can absolutely embrace that story, and tell it.
Yeah, and when looking back in your career, what are some of the most valuable lessons you've learned about personal growth and professional development?
Not to take things personally, as I mentioned earlier. I think that's quite key. And also to hold things lightly. I mean, this might sound a little bit esoteric. Is that, you know, when you start working and you work with an organization or a corporate, one can get really immersed in your career and in your job. I think don't forget who you are. Hold things lightly. If things change with them, you know, and just be adaptable to that change. Don't be afraid to pivot. Don't be afraid to unlearn and relearn. That's a big thing, in fact, for a lot of adults. I don't say older people. That sounds terribly patronizing because I am an older person. But, you know, when I've been at my most challenged and where I've experienced the most growth is where I've had to unlearn past patterns or past thought processes and relearn and be open to the relearning. I think that's pretty key.
Yeah, and I'm going to lean more towards your personal life. How do you manage your own work life and balance?
Well, I've got COVID to thank for that, actually, which is quite interesting because, you know, before the pandemic happened, you know, I led a team of about 65 people in South Africa at a content marketing agency. And, you know, like everybody else, we were in the office Monday to Friday, you know, 8:30 to 5. And then COVID hits, and it was a really incredible phenomenon to actually see how people, some of them, I mean, you know, in some instances found it difficult to be in lockdown, and I think many of us did. But for me, the positive coming out of that is most companies globally have embraced a 4-day work week. Most companies are now have embraced hybrid working. So at Dentsu, for example, we're encouraged to go into the office 2 days a week and work from home 3 days a week. In some other organizations, like WPP, for example, they've mandated 3 days. The companies that are going back to mandating the old school way of doing things, which is a 5-day full work week, are getting pushback, and rightly so, because I think if you trust people enough to manage their own time and advocate for themselves and have agency and do their work, you measure the outcome. You don't measure the bum in the seat in the office, right? Yeah. So I think that for me has been a wonderful way to really ensure that there is work-life balance, is that I'm at home now to see when my child gets home. So, you know, and I can, you know, take a break for 10 minutes to engage with him and then get back to my desk. So I think it's easier said than done. I think, you know, when business gets really pressurized and we get really, really busy, I think we need to make sure that we have boundaries in place, that, you know, we cut off from certain times. I've got some senior stakeholder colleagues who will, you know, actively take a break from, you know, 5 to 7 to be with their children and then work again for another hour if they need to. So again, it's managing your time and putting boundaries in place.
Yeah, and is there any advice you would give to young aspiring entrepreneurs or individuals who are looking to pursue a career in content and the marketing industry, or any specific steps that they can take? I'm actually going to rephrase the question and ask it in a way of, how were you able to go from being a teenager and a 17, 18-year-old, and what steps did you take to become the individual you are today in this industry?
Good question. Yeah, the early teenage years, I wouldn't wish upon anyone again, and I wouldn't want to repeat them, because it was an incredible time of self-doubt and, you know, not believing in myself. And, you know, and only after I'd studied and then started working and then got knocked about a bit, to be quite honest with you. I mean, when you're young and you're starting out, you think you can do everything. And, you know, you realize quite quickly that there's a big world out there. And, you know, and I'm talking from my own perspective as a 16, 17, 18-year-old. One of the things I was very clear on, though, when I started, is that I was told, and I'll never forget this, I was told, I was a bit older, I just finished studying, so I must have been about 21. I was told that the only route into a marketing career was to be a secretary. And I said, well, I don't want to be a secretary. I want to be a marketer. So I basically knocked down doors and got myself a job and worked my way up and into my career in publishing. It's just because I really believed I could do it. I wasn't really taking no for an answer. It might be because I was totally naive to what was going on in the world, but I was really adamant that I was going to do it. And and the other thing that I did, and I still do today, is I learned quite quickly to surround myself with people who inspire me and who could mentor me. So whether it was an active mentor or an official mentor or not, I did surround myself with people that I really was inspired by, and learned from them. And I still do that today.
Yeah, and again, when discussing your career and the past you've taken, what are you most proud of?
Um, I'm most proud of being of achieving what I've achieved, I guess, and being comfortable with that, and embracing setbacks, being resilient, and what I'm also most proud of is the ability to give back. So I studied a master's degree in coaching a few years ago. Actually, it ended in 2019. And one of the things I'm really passionate about is giving back. So I actually, on a pro bono basis anyway, mentor a lot of colleagues in the industry. And I think that's really important, is to give back what you've learned, give back what you've achieved, and help others on the same path. So that's what I'm really most proud of. Not so much the career. Well, the career is, but actually what I've been able to impart or assist other people doing and grow others.
Yeah, and then there's a constant question I've asked all my guests, which is, what is your personal definition of success?
My personal definition of success is being able to go to sleep at night knowing that I've done my absolute best, that I've achieved my objectives, and that I've learned from my mistakes.
And have you achieved that success? And what is the next step in your journey to either continue achieving it or to achieve it in the near future?
I think it's an ongoing thing. I feel I've still got many years ahead to make a difference and to make a change. So yeah, what's next? I don't know. I'm open to it. I've just relocated to a different country, so I'm hoping to be in London for a few more years, and then be open to see, excuse me, where the path takes me.
Yeah, and then to end us off, if you could go back and say one thing to your 16-year-old self, what would that be?
Work hard. Yeah, do well at school. The one thing I say I've got an older son and I've got a 13-year-old, and what I say to both of them is, no matter what happens, nobody can take away your education. So, I might sound like somebody's mother because I am somebody's mother, but it's absolutely true. And really, from my experience, is work really hard at school. Pursue a career, pursue an education, that, because no matter what you do, and no matter what path, no matter what you study, and no matter what life throws at you, and no matter what path you take, no one can take away your education, and no one can take away that as a starting point, and continue learning and continue growing. So that would be my advice to myself as a 16-year-old and any other person sort of starting out in their career, is keep learning, work hard, and be resilient.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much, and I really do appreciate this conversation.
Absolute pleasure. All the
Cool.
best.
Thank you for listening to that episode of Graded Podcast with Lanie Carstens on marketing. See you next time.